everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for the session. Hope you're all being safe out there. I want to thank Women Tech Makers Coimbatore chapter for giving me this opportunity to share my learnings with the developer community. Before moving on to the session, I want to talk a bit about myself. So, I am Niveta Maran, currently working as a software engineer at Fokites with almost 3 years of industry experience. I started working as a mobile app developer, then switched on to front end, where I started with developing applications using JavaScript, jQuery, and then moved on to working on frameworks like React and Angular. Apart from that, have been an ambassador for Google Developers Group and Women Tech Makers Chennai for close to 2 years now. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Would love to connect with you all over there. And my social handle is Niveta Maran, all of them. Feel free to connect with me. So that's pretty much about myself. Let's get started with the session. So in today's session, I'm going to cover some of the basic concepts on the most popular and in-demand framework in the industry, which is Angular. At the end of the session, one would be able to start developing the Angular applications on their own. The agenda and the topics we are going to cover today are, to start off with, what is Angular basically? Why and when to use Angular when compared to other frameworks like React and Vue.js. Then we will see the steps to install Angular locally, and after which we will see about what are the different parts of an Angular. Then we'll see about some of the commonly used terms in Angular application like modules, components, communication between different components and services. Then finally discussing about what are the next steps from there. So let's just get started. For those who don't know what is a front end, or for those who think that front end is just about a color or a font change, or who are from a back-end background, this is a slide for you all. So what is front end and what are its technologies? So any website that you see in the internet, almost everything is developed using three main technologies, that is HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So HTML is nothing but a markup language which is used to define the structure of the page, and CSS is used for adding styles to the page, and finally any interaction that the user is doing in the website is implemented using JavaScript. So what are frameworks then, and why to use them? A framework is a tool which allows the developers to create an app instantly by providing all the required commonly used modules bundled together. So these frameworks are based on the design patterns like MVC, Model View Controller and solid concepts which are being used in almost all the softwares. So the main advantages of using a framework is that they allow us to skip all the tedious process of developing the application from the scratch. That provide us with the basic structure that we needed to create a web application, resulting in saving a lot of time for the web developers. For example, if we take this piece of code, you can see that I'm trying to print a set of different contents with the same div structure. Even though only the content is getting changed, I need to repeat the same structure over and over again to get the desired result. This can be totally avoided by using frameworks like Angular, where I have a provision to use a for loop and achieve the same result by passing a set of content, by similarly which we use in backend. So these frameworks helps us to achieve the same result with a minimal lines of code with increased maintainability and reusability. Now let's see what are components, the most commonly used buzzword while developing web application these days. As you can see in the above example, there is a typical structure of a website. A header, a navigation menu with a set of menu items, then the content of the website is a list of cards with the image and description associated with each image, and a calendar widget. As you can see, the structure of the main page seems to be similar, only the content seems to be different, right? So, the component based design is nothing but visualizing the entire website like a set of reusable components as highlighted over here in this image. We can design and develop a single card component where it contains an image and a description attached to it. So we can input a set of different contents to this component to iterate over each of them and display in the browser. Instead of repeating the same set of lines of code, so that's pretty much the components in web applications. We can think of them something like a widget where we can plug in the components wherever needed, just passing a different input. So now let's see what exactly is Angular and how does it help the web developers to develop a good applications with minimal effort. So Angular is a front-end framework as everybody knows, developed by Google. It is written in a TypeScript language, which is a superset of JavaScript. The TypeScript is mainly written to overcome one of the main problems of static typing present in JavaScript. In order to start developing apps with Angular, one needs to be familiar with the basic understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Knowing TypeScript is an added advantage, but it's not mandatory to know it in order to develop Angular applications. So the prerequisites for developing an Angular application would be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And one of the important points or one of the important facts about Angular is that there are two major versions attached to it. One is Angular JS or Angular 1, and the other one is Angular 2 to 9. So these two versions are completely different from each other. Angular 2 has overcome a lot of shortcomings in Angular JS. The versions from Angular 2 to 9, they have backward compatibility and the basic structure is almost the same. So in each version of some of the updates are being done from Angular 2 to 9, but when you compare Angular JS and Angular 2, they are very different from each other. So Angular 2 has overcome some of the shortcomings like difficulty to maintain unreusable components in AngularJS. So now let's see what are the main differences between the two most popularly used framework and library in the industry, Angular and React. The basic underlying difference is that Angular is a complete framework while React is just a library. As in, Angular comes with the whole package and a set of dependencies needed to develop web application. Instead, React is a library which helps the developers to create UI components. We need to import external libraries and packages to enable features like routing, whereas the Angular comes with the whole package inbuilt with them. So that's why it's a framework. Angular is developed and maintained by Google, while React is developed and maintained by Facebook. As seen before, the Angular is written in TypeScript, while React is done using JSX. And one of the main cons of Angular is that it has a steep learning curve when compared to React. It is very easy to start developing with React rather than Angular, while you need to know the basics of it. Usually, Angular is preferred for large scale enterprise applications as it comes with a standard structure with design patterns implemented, whereas in React, the developers has to come up with their own architecture to implement a React application, which sometimes might not be scalable in the future. So these are some of the major differences between Angular and React, and one can use either of them based on the requirement that the application has. So here are some of the famous companies which use React. They are Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, Uber, Netflix, and the Angular is used by companies like Google, HBO, Forbes, Nikon, etc. Now let's see how to install the commands needed to install Angular locally. In order to install Angular locally, we need to we need Node and NVM. The required version would be version 6 for Node. So we can use the curl command as present in the slide to install NVM, which will install Node along with that. After installing it, make sure if they are properly installed by checking using the command nvm-v. After which we can install Angular CLI globally, which is a command line interface used to create Angular applications for developing Angular applications. Then we can use the ng new app name to create a new Angular application. So running the above ng serve command after creating a new application will start the Angular app locally in the port 4200 as in the image shown above. Instead of installing locally, we can also use online free softwares like StackBlitz for playing around, which will provide the same Angular environment. Now let's see what are the files and folder structure that are present in an Angular app and what is use of each of these files. The Angular app contains the above files after creating a new app locally. Let's just see what is the purpose of each one of them. Starting from the bottom, the Angular JSON and package.json. Angular, they both are the configuration files for an app, whereas the angular.json contains the configuration needed for build, test and serve file locations, whereas the package.json holds the information from about the dependencies for the project. Index.html and main.ts are the starting points of an Angular app, where we call the root module and root component. We will be seeing about what are the modules and components in detail in the upcoming slides. And apart from that, we have the initial components created, which is the app component, and an initial module created already, which is app module. At last, we have style.css, which will be used for adding in the styles for our application, and polyfills.ts to support different browsers. So apart from that, we have node modules and other dependencies needed for the Angular project. And these are some of the main files which we will be using while developing Angular applications. So now let's see how to create components and what are the different parts that are involved in the component. So the command used to create a component in Angular application is ng generate component name, or a shorthand form would be ngc component name. After executing this particular command, the CLI creates 4 different files for us with 4 different extensions like .html, .ts, .css and aspect.ts. Whereas .html file is used to create the view of the component, and .ts file is where the business logic of the component is added, and .css has the required styles for the component, and aspect.ts file for the unit test cases for that particular component. So that's how the components are being created in Angular. Now moving on to one of the important features of Angular, that is modules. Modules, as the name suggests, helps us to hold and group the information of a set of components and its associated services together related to a particular feature. Modules can be created for different features used in the application. It's basically a class with an ng module decorator. So for example, if we have an employee managing application, then there will be a root module and modules can be created to each of the features like employee feature, login feature and report feature. While the employee feature module contains the components and services related to employees, login feature groups the components and services related to login feature and similarly report. Thus, the module kind of gives a modularity to an application as the name suggests, helping to scale and segregate the application in a pattern. The module file will have an extension of module.ts. The module class contains 5 main parts: imports, exports, declarations, providers, and bootstraps. So the imports are basically used for importing the modules needed for that particular feature, and exports are used for exporting the components and the modules to the external application. Then we will have the services that are used in the feature under providers attribute, and declaration attribute is used to declare the components that we have created in a particular feature, and bootstrap is for bootstrapping that particular module. So if you take this example of app module file, all the 5 components are being present. So we have imported the third-party modules like browser module and forms module. Then we have declared the set of components which we have created as part of this application, and also bootstrap the component as a root component under app. So that's pretty much about the modules in Angular. Next, coming to the last part of the session, that is services. Any web application involves the calls to HTTP services to fetch some dynamic data and load it in web page. So this can be implemented using services in Angular. So services is nothing but a class with a specific purpose. We can use component file to fetch data apart from doing the business logic, but it will become too large and difficult to maintain if it consists of the code related to API interaction, data fetching and server-side interaction tasks. So that's when we have to use services. So these services can be created using the command ng generate service name .service.ts. Note that the file name should end with the extension of service.ts. So here we can implement and segregate all the API calls, data fetching and using them, and after which sending the data to the components to load them in the HTML or the web page. So these are some of the basic concepts that one need to know before kickstarting the development of Angular application, after which one can explore advanced concepts like routing, unit testing, lifecycle hooks and so on. Just to sum it up, in today's session we saw what is Angular basically, when to use Angular over other frameworks, then we saw how to install, after which we saw about the concepts like components, modules and services. Hope we had got some idea about Angular, which helps you to kickstart with developing applications. Thank you all for watching the session.